Alright, with the B-roll foreplay out of the way, let's dive into the hands of the second ever meetup game hosted at Lucky Chances. In this first spot, I raised a 12 from the cutoff with ace-8 of diamonds. I pick up callers from the button and big blind, both of which seem ready to donate to the Master Lock Trust Fund. We take a flop 3 ways, which comes 9-6-5 with a heart draw. Checks to me, and with a gutter, I bet 30. Button calls, big blind folds, and we go heads up to a turn of a jack of spades. I slow down and check, and the button checks back. I call for a 7, which doesn't come, and while ace high could occasionally be the best hand, I also don't want to lose any of the cards that pair the flop. I bet 40 as a bluff, and my opponent folds. Take down an early hand to start the session. Next hand I raise the 15 from under the gun with king queen of hearts. The blinds call, and we go 3 ways to a flop of jack 10-7 with a diamond draw. The blinds check, and with open-ended on a board that my opponents could have some strong hands, I decide to take the cautious route and check. 4th street comes a 4 of clubs, small blind checks, and big blind bets 25. Just gonna try and make my hand. I put in calling chips, as does the small blind. River comes a 6 of diamonds, so I brick out. Checks to me this time, and I decide against a stab, even though that's probably the only way I'll win the hand. Small blind has king high, and big blind wins with ace 10. The straddle is on in this next hand, and I raise a 20 from the low jack with king 9 of spades. Button calls, and big blind puts in a re-raise to 85. Under normal non-meetup game situations, I'd probably just fold. This hand interacts poorly against top of range hands, namely ace-king. And king 9 suited is sort of like Maria Sharapova at the end of her tennis career. Looks good but doesn't perform all that well. All that said, I want to see a flop and I put in the call, and button calls as well. 3 ways to a flop that comes 9 high with a club draw, so pretty good giving me top pair. Big blind continues his aggression for a decent amount of 175. I've got 300 in my stack, and this is sort of the problem with playing this hand. Although I flop top pair, I don't feel great about it since my opponent has all over pairs in range. And I also have to be concerned about club draws with multiple combos that are actually equity favorites against my hand. Long story short, I decided to painfully let this one go, and the button folds as well. Big blind was kind enough to show his hand. Ace king of clubs. Would have been a coin flip. Last interesting hand at this first table. Under the gun raises to 15. Low jack calls, and I 3-bet to 65 from the cutoff with ace queen offsuit. Under the gun calls, and we go heads up to a flop of queen 9-5 with a flush draw, so I flop good with top pair and running hearts. Under the gun checks, I bet 50, and he calls. Turn comes a 5 of hearts pairing the board and giving me the nut flush draw. When under the gun checks, I'm just going to keep betting for value against Broadway holdings, and a 9 being the main targets. I settle on 115, and after some deliberation, under the gun calls. 5th street rolls off, the jack of hearts, so I improve to the nut flush. When under the gun checks, I have a clear bet. Sizing is the main consideration, and given the 4 heart run out, I think it's going to be hard to get called using a polarized bet. So a bit unbalanced here, but I put out 100, and he pretty quickly calls. I turn my hand over, and my opponent ends up showing ace king with the king of hearts. Bit of a mini cooler here. First hand at the second table, under the gun 1 limps, and I raise to 15 from the low jack with 10-8 of clubs. I pick up 4 non-believers, and we go heavily multi-way to a flop of 9-7-4, so I flop open-ended on a board that contains a spade draw. Small blind decides to lead for 35. Good price to see a turn, so I call, and the other 3 players fold. Heads up to a turn, which comes the ace of diamonds. Small blind continues the aggression for 50, and I consider a raise since the ace is theoretically a good card for me, but I settle on a call. Looking to bink the river, it comes the 8 of diamonds, so I pair my bottom card. Small blind thinks about it before checking, and with a 10 in my hand along with a couple straight draws completing on the river, I go for it and try to rep. I bet 180. He says he believes I have a straight, so that's good as it makes me feel like he's going to fold, but he tosses in a chip instead to signify a call. He wins with ace 9 of spades. Next notable spot, I make a loose open to 12 from the cutoff with 8-9 offsuit. Only the big blind calls, and the flop comes queen 10-9 with 2 clubs and a diamond, and action checks through. Turn comes a deuce of spades, and big blind bets 17. I play with this opponent a fair amount, and after all those hands, I still have 0 read on him. I call, and the river comes a 7 of hearts, and he puts out another bet, 25. I tell him a 10 is good before I put in the call, but he doesn't have a 10. He's got ace 9. And although this man came to this meetup game, it's clear that he's learned a thing or two from Brad Owen, as he takes me straight to Value Town. Shortly after there's a limp, and I pick up a premium from the hijack and raise to 15. It gets to the big blind who puts in a 3-bet to 60, the limper folds, and I proceed with the call. Heads up to a flop of king 8 deuce, all spades, so not the best flop. Big blind down c-bets 35, that's good enough to see a turn, so I put in the call, and 4th street comes another spade. Big blind continues the aggression for 100, and I decide to let this one go, and after I do, big blind shows the deuce of diamonds for the successful bluff. I should have known better than to trust a guy wearing a beanie with the word straddle printed on it. Last notable hand at the second table, there's an undergun raise to 15. I call from the low jack with 5-7 of clubs. Button and the blinds call as well. 5 ways to a flop of 10-5-3, all different suits. The blinds check, undergun bets 35, I call, button calls, and the blinds fold. Continuing 3 ways to a turn of a 3 of hearts pairing the board and putting up backdoor hearts. When undergun checks, I feel like I may have the best hand. I bet 100 primarily for protection. Button calls, undergun folds, and we go heads up to a river of a 10 of clubs double pairing the board. With decent showdown, I check. Button does not check and bets 130. And given the variety of draws that bricked, I call hoping to successfully bluff catch, but get shown 6-3 for a full house and another trip to Paintown.
Good hand, good hand.
First notable hand at the third table, early position raises to 15, and I flat from middle position with pocket 5s. Cutoff and button also call, and we go 4 ways to a flop of king 8-8, all black. Initial raise in early position checks, I check, and cutoff bets 35. Button in early position fold, I call. Heads up to a turn of a 7 of diamonds, so a relative blank, and action checks through. The river comes a jack of hearts, and just gonna check looking to get to showdown and beat some ace highs. Cutoff does check back, but does not have ace high. He's got 9s instead to take this one down.
Good hand.
Next spot, there's a cutoff straddle, and early position raises to 20. I call from the button with a hopeful hand, 5 deuce of hearts. The blinds and cutoff call as well, and we go 5 ways to a flop of ace deuce 3, all red. Action surprisingly checks through, and the turn comes a jack of hearts, so I pick up a backdoor flush draw. The blinds check, and the initial raiser bets 75. Cutoff folds, and with a combo draw, I'm not in the mood to bow out just yet. Small blind folds, and big blind calls. Continuing 3 ways to a river of a 10 of diamonds, so I miss. Front door diamonds do complete, and big blind leads for 150. Early position ends up 10 calling. I fold. Big blind has 6-8 of diamonds for the goods, and early position shows 4-5 of diamonds to get cooled off. Shortly after, there's an under the gun straddle. Hijack raises to 12. Small blind calls. I call from the big blind with queen 10 offsuit, and the straddler calls as well. 4 ways to a flop of king 6-3 rainbow, and action checks through. Turn comes a jack of spades, giving me an up and down straight draw, and also putting up backdoor spades. Small blind checks and I bet 25. Under the gun and hijack call. Small blind folds. 3 ways to a river, which comes a queen of hearts, so a river second pair. I decided to bet 50 for thin value, but looking back, it seems pretty unlikely to get called by a jack or worse. Undergun thinks a bit and puts in the call, and then hijack puts in a hefty raise to 260. I fold, and undergun tank folds what felt like 2 pair. This hand goes to the hijack. Next spot, I raise a 12 from the hijack with pocket 10s. The blinds call, and the flop comes gin, 10 deuce deuce. When the blinds check, I check back just hoping they can catch up. Turn comes a king of spades. Small blind checks. Big blind bets 20. I continue to play this one deceptively and just call, and the small blind calls as well. River comes a queen of spades, which is a decent card since it does make some strong hands available that my opponents can have. The blinds end up checking, and I bet 100. Small blind goes into the tank and ends up calling.
I got it.
Big blind folds, and I take this one down in semi-cool off small blinds, king queen offsuit. Hand immediately after, I raise a 12 from the cutoff with queen jack offsuit. Button and the blinds call, and we take a flop 4 ways, which comes queen jack 10 with a spade draw, and giving me top 2. Checks to me, I bet 25, button folds, and the blinds call. Turn comes a relative blank, the 7 of clubs. Checks to me, and on this board texture, I offer a more polarized bet of 100. Small blind tank folds, and big blind follows suit.
I have it.
Rotating tables once again, I lose a hand with ace-10 of diamonds when I failed to hero call the river in which ace-high was good. Shortly after, there's a middle position raise to 15. Low jack and cutoff call, and I call from the small blind with 7-8 of diamonds. 4 ways to a flop with 6-4-3, giving me a nut shot. Checks the middle position who bets 40. Low jack and cutoff call, and I entertain a squeeze but take the conservative route and just call, continuing 4 ways to a turn of a 3 of diamonds, pairing the board and giving me a backdoor flush draw. Checks the middle position who bets 100, low jack tank folds, cutoff tank calls, and in this spot I could occasionally be drawing dead. My read on the situation is that middle position seems relatively strong with an overpair, and cutoff is drawing like I am. And as Patrick Antonius once said, you can't win if you don't gamble. I put in the 100 and the river comes a red, 6 of hearts. Yeah, thanks for that advice, Patrick. I check, middle position checks this time, and cutoff puts out a large bet of 400. I get out of the way and middle position fairly quickly calls. Cutoff mucks and middle position wins with pocket jacks. Next spot there's an undergun 1 raised to 11, and I make a fun call from middle position with 4-5 offsuit. Cutoff calls, and button puts in a re-raise to 45. Undergun 1 calls, and at this point in the game I'm stuck roughly 1100, and while I should have just folded to the initial $11 raise, I now feel compelled to call since the 3-bet amount matches my cards. I try to be like Mike and make a comeback with the 45, and the cutoff calls as well. Looking to drill the flop? I do, as it comes jack 5-4 with 2 spades and a heart giving me bottom 2. Checks to the 3-better on the button who bets 150, undergun folds, and with 450 in my stack, it goes in the middle. Cutoff folds, and button calls. We table our hands and he has pocket queens, and just need to fade the run out.
Oh, slipper. Wow. Oh, he's ahead. Oh. So dead to a queen. No, yeah, oh, that was close. Scary.
Last few hands, there's an undergun 1 raised to 15. I call from middle position with pocket 5s. Button and the blinds call as well. Heavily multi-way to a flop of 8-8-4 with a club draw. After the blinds and undergun 1 check, I take the green light and bet 45 for value and protection. Button and small blind fold, and then big blind puts in just about a min raise to 100. Under the gun 1 folds, and for that price, I'm gonna speculate. 4th street comes to 10 of hearts, and big blind continues the aggression for 115. And while he could have an 8, he can also just be bluffing. Having the 5 of clubs in my hand is somewhat relevant since it takes away some flush draws that he could have. And after some deliberation, I decided to just let this one go. Big blind does end up showing his hand. 8-7 for the goods.
Nice hand, man. Nice hand. Thank you. Andrew, you want me to answer for you?
Next spot there's an undergun straddle. 5 players call, and I'm in the big blind with king jack of clubs, and I increase the price of admission to 45. Undergun 1 and cutoff call, and we go 3 ways to a flop of queen 10 deuce rainbow giving me open-ended. I see bet 70, undergun 1 folds, cutoff calls. Heads up to 4th street which comes, the ace of hearts, so I turn hard making the nuts. I decide to check looking to induce, and it works out as cutoff bets 115 with a bit over 400 back. Given the effective stack size and board texture, it's a bit of a weird spot. I ultimately decide to rip, which in hindsight I don't love, and after cutoff thinks it through a bit, she folds. Don't get max value, but always good to lock it up.
I have it.
Last notable hand, I straddle from under the gun, and there are 3 callers. Hijack raises to 40, cutoff and button call, and it gets me in the straddle with pocket queens. Looking to thin the field, I repop to 225. The initial raiser on the hijack jams for 302. The other players fold, I call and table my queens, he flips over just a king of spades to create suspense, which I can appreciate after recently watching Squid Game. And we're off to a run out.
Green ball. Oh, that's a good flop for me. I'll take a 9. Good hand, man.
Alright, that's going to do it for the hands at the second ever meetup game at Lucky Chances. It was such a great time and turnout. We're actually going to run it back next month on Thursday, December 9th. This time with both Check Raise Charles and Doug McCusker. If you'd like to sign up, please head over to projectlock.com. Link in the description box below. Alright, just recording this outro as I leave my hotel room at the Park MGM to head to the Rio for the 888 event. But just want to thank everyone for coming out to the meetup game. Really great time meeting a bunch of people that tuned into the videos. Doug and I were super stoked to just mix it up with everyone. And just want to give a big thanks to Mike and Dustin for collaborating to put on this meetup game. And just big shout out to everyone that worked that day, from the floor staff to the dealers to the servers. Everyone just did a great job in creating a fun atmosphere. And as for the poker results, I got in the game originally for $500. Had to rebuy quite a few times. Ultimately ended up in the game for 1,600 and I cashed out for 965. So book an overall loss of 635, but a much bigger win in terms of the overall enjoyment that I had playing with everyone. And that's gonna wrap it up for this video. I am gonna try to make some cash game vlogs during my time out here, even though most of it's gonna be playing tournaments. But with that, I'll see you in the next video.